My name is Mia Ashford, and despite everything I've achieved, I was never good enough for my family. But that night at what should have been their moment of triumph, everything changed. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to walk away from someone who refused to see your worth. I suppose my story begins where most family tragedies do, with expectations that were never meant to be mine to fulfill, growing. Up in Saratoga Springs, New York, in the shadow of my father's pharmaceutical empire, I learned early that love was conditional. And conditions were never quite met. My father, Harrison Ashford, built Ashford Biogenics from nothing. He was the kind of man who measured success in quarterly reports and measured people and their usefulness to his legacy. My mother, Margaret, was the perfect corporate wife, beautiful, well-connected, and utterly devoted to maintaining the family's social standing. Together, they created a world where image was everything, and I was expected to be the perfect reflection of their success. But I was never quite what they wanted, too serious, too independent, too focused on my own path rather than the one they'd mapped out for me, while they wanted me to major in business or marry into another prominent family. I chose neuroscience at Cornell, while they wanted me to be a charming socialite. I spent my time in research labs and libraries. The disappointments accumulated like sediment in a river, small at first, but eventually changing the entire landscape of our relationship, missed recitals because of board meetings, forgotten birthdays because of business trips, conversations that felt more like performance reviews than family discussions, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what would happen on what should have been one of the most important days of my life. May 15th, 2019, Cornell University, Ithaca, New York, the day I received my Ph.D. In neuroscience with highest honors. I was 27 years old, and I'd just achieved something that less than 2% of the population ever would. I had discovered a potential breakthrough in early-stage Alzheimer's treatment during my dissertation research. I had job offers from 3 major pharmaceutical companies and 2 prestigious research institutions. I was on top of the world, and I had 2 empty seats in the audience. My parents had promised to come. For weeks, I had planned every detail. I had reserved them seats in the front section for families. I had made dinner reservations at the nicest restaurant in Ithaca. I had even bought my mother a beautiful silk scarf from a boutique in downtown Saratoga Springs, her favorite color. Lavender with a subtle pattern that reminded me of the hydrangeas she grew in our garden. The morning of graduation, I called to confirm the timing. My mother answered, her voice strained in that particular way that meant she was about to deliver. Bad news while trying to sound apologetic. Victoria, honey, I'm so sorry. But your father had an emergency board meeting. The acquisition in Switzerland hit a snag, and he needs to fly out tonight. We just can't make it. I stood in my apartment, holding the phone, wearing my graduation gown, and felt something break inside me that I didn't even know could break. Mom, this is my Ph.D. graduation. I've been working toward this for 6 years. I know, sweetheart, and we're so proud of you, but you understand how important this deal is for the company. Your father's worked so hard for this opportunity. What about my opportunity? What about my achievement? There was a pause. In that pause, I heard 27 years of my life being weighed against a business deal and found wanting. We'll celebrate when you get home. We'll have a lovely dinner, just the 3 of us. I hung up the phone and sat. On my bed, staring at the empty cap and gown box, my roommate Sarah found me there 30 minutes later, still in my gown, holding the lavender scarf. Victoria, are you okay? We need to leave soon. I looked up at her. This wonderful friend who had supported me through every late night and every research setback. And I made a decision that would change everything. Sarah, would you like to have your parents sit in the front row? I have 2 extra seats. She knew immediately what that meant. Sarah had been my roommate for 3 years. She had heard every disappointed phone call, every excuse, every promise that was broken for the sake of business. She sat down next to me and took my hand. I'm so sorry, Victoria. Don't be. Today, I'm going to walk across that stage, and I'm going to celebrate with people who actually want to be here. And I did. I walked across that stage with my head high, accepted my diploma, and smiled for the photographs. Sarah's parents cheered for me as if I were their own daughter. My research advisor, Dr. Elizabeth Manning, gave me a hug that felt more parental than anything I had received in years. That night at dinner, Sarah's mother, Patricia, raised her glass and said, "To Victoria," who proves that excellence doesn't require an audience. It creates one. I smiled and toasted with them, but inside I was already planning something that would take me 4 years to execute. After graduation, I accepted a position at Pharmaceuticals in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It wasn't the biggest company that had courted me, but it was the most innovative. They gave me my own research team and complete autonomy to pursue my Alzheimer's research. I threw myself into my work with a focus that bordered on obsession. I wasn't just building a career, I was building a fortress. Every successful experiment, every published paper, every industry award was another brick in the wall between me and the people who had decided that my achievements weren't worth their time. My research team and I made breakthrough after breakthrough. We developed a diagnostic tool that could detect Alzheimer's biomarkers 15 years before symptoms appeared. We created a treatment protocol that slowed cognitive decline by 60% in early-stage patients. We were revolutionizing how the world understood and treated neurodegenerative diseases. The pharmaceutical industry took notice. Medical journals featured my work. I was invited to speak at conferences around the world. At 31, I was named one of Forbes 30 Under 30 in healthcare innovation. At 32, I won the prestigious Breakthrough Prize in Life Sciences, and through it all, my parents maintained their pattern of conditional attention. They would call after they saw me mentioned in a business publication, full of pride and wanting to share my success with their social circle. They would invite me to family events when they needed to show off their accomplished daughter to their friends, but they never asked about the work itself, never showed genuine interest in what I was actually doing. I played along because, at some level, I was still that little girl who wanted their approval. I would come home for holidays, smile at their dinner parties, and let them bask in reflected glory while feeling increasingly hollow inside. But everything changed when I received the call that would alter the trajectory of my life forever. It was a Tuesday morning in October 2023. I was in my lab, reviewing data from our latest clinical trial, when my assistant knocked on my door. "Dr. Ashford? There's someone on the phone for you. He says he's from the Nobel Committee." I thought it was a joke. The Nobel Committee doesn't just call people on Tuesday mornings, but I took the call anyway. And 30 seconds later, I was sitting in my chair trying to process what I had just heard. The Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for my work on early detection and treatment of Alzheimer's disease. I was going to Stockholm in December to receive the highest honor in scientific achievement. At 33 years old, I was one of the youngest Nobel laureates in history. My first instinct was to call my parents, despite everything. Despite years of disappointment and dismissal, I wanted to share this moment with them. I wanted them to understand, finally, what I had been working toward all these years. I called my mother first. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and social. She was clearly with company. "Victoria, how wonderful to hear from you. I was just telling the Hendersons about your last article in that medical journal. Mom, I need to tell you something. I just received a call from the Nobel Committee. I won the Nobel Prize." There was silence. Complete silence. I could hear voices in the background. The clink of glasses. The sound of a life going on around this moment that should have stopped everything. The Nobel Prize? Are you sure? That seems like quite a big deal. Mom, it's the biggest deal. It's the Nobel Prize. I'm going to Stockholm in December for the ceremony. Oh my goodness, your father is going to be so... Harrison, come here. Victoria has some news. I heard my father's voice in the background, heard my mother explaining, then he was on the phone, his voice carrying that tone of controlled excitement that meant he was already calculating the business implications. "Victoria, this is extraordinary. This is exactly the kind of recognition that could open doors for Ashford Biogenics. Have you thought about licensing your research? We could create a whole new division." And there it was. Even my Nobel Prize was, in his mind, an opportunity for his company. "Dad, I want to invite you and Mom to Stockholm. The ceremony is December 10th. It's going to be incredible. Stockholm? In December? Victoria, that's going to be right in the middle of our holiday party season. We have the board dinner on the 8th and the annual investor gala on the 12th. Those events are crucial for the company's social calendar. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Dad, this is the Nobel Prize. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Of course it is, honey, and we're incredibly proud. But you understand how important these December events are for our business relationships. Surely the Nobel Committee would. Understand if we couldn't make it, you could take pictures, maybe even accept the award on our behalf somehow. I hung up the phone. I sat in my lab, surrounded by the work that had just earned me the highest recognition in science. And I realized that nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be important. Enough to my parents to take precedence over their business and social obligations. That was when I decided to plan my coronation. I spent the next 2 months planning what I privately called my coronation, the Nobel Prize ceremony, and everything that would surround it. But more than that, I was planning my final statement to my parents about what their choices had cost them. I booked the most elegant hotel in Stockholm, the Grand Hotel, and reserved their entire presidential suite for the week. I hired a private jet to transport my chosen family to Stockholm, Sarah and her parents. They are Manning and her husband, my research team, and 3 other mentors who had supported me throughout my career. I commissioned a custom gown from a designer. In Paris, midnight blue silk with subtle beading that caught the light like stars. I arranged for a private dinner at the Nobel Museum after the ceremony, complete with a string quartet and a 7-course meal prepared by a Michelin-starred chef. But the centerpiece of my coronation was the gift I had prepared for my parents, a gift that would demonstrate exactly what they had chosen to miss. I hired a professional videographer to document the entire week in Stockholm, not just the ceremony, but everything. The private dinners, the conversations with other laureates, the moments of pure joy and celebration with people who had actually supported my journey. I also commissioned a custom piece from a master craftsman in Sweden, a crystal sculpture that depicted the molecular structure of the compound I had discovered for early Alzheimer's detection. It was stunning, scientifically accurate, and inscribed with the date of my Nobel Prize ceremony. The plan was simple. I would create a complete record of one of the most important weeks of my life, and I would present it to my parents as a gift. They would see exactly what they had chosen to miss, and they would understand that their absence had been noted, documented, and remembered. But I wasn't going to make this gesture privately. I was going to make it at the one place where they would feel the full weight of their choice, their annual holiday party, December 4th through 11th, 2023, Stockholm, Sweden, the most magnificent week of my life. I arrived at the Grand Hotel on a snowy Sunday evening, and for the first time in my life, I felt like royalty, not because of the luxury or the attention, but because I was surrounded by people who understood the magnitude of what I had achieved. Sarah and her parents arrived on Monday, and Patricia cried when she saw me in the hotel lobby. "Victoria, I'm so proud of you. This is what you've worked for your entire life, Doctor." Manning arrived on Tuesday with her husband, and we spent the evening walking through Old Stockholm, talking about science and life, and the incredible journey that had brought us to this moment. My research team arrived on Wednesday, and we had a private dinner where we toasted not just my Nobel Prize, but every late night, every failed experiment, every moment of doubt that had led us to this breakthrough. The ceremony itself was on December 10th, and it was everything I dreamed it could be. I walked into the Stockholm concert hall wearing my midnight blue gown, and I felt the weight of history and achievement settling around me like a crown when King Carl XVI Gustaf presented me with the Nobel Prize. I looked out into the audience and saw the faces of people who had supported me, believed in me, and celebrated my success without reservation. Sarah was crying. Dr. Manning was beaming. My research team was cheering. In that moment, I realized that I had never needed my parents' approval. I had built my own family, my own support system, my own definition of success after the ceremony. We had our private dinner at the Nobel Museum. The videographer captured everything. The toast, the laughter, the stories, the pure joy of being surrounded by people who loved me for exactly who I was. But the most important moment came on our last night in Stockholm. We were all gathered in the presidential suite, and Dr. Manning raised her glass for a final toast. To Mia, she said, who showed us that the greatest achievements come not from seeking approval, but from pursuing excellence for its own sake. You have changed the world, and you have done it with grace, intelligence, and integrity. You are not just a Nobel laureate. You are a remarkable human being. I cried that night not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that I had found my true family, and they had been with me all along. I returned to the United States on December 12th, and my parents called that afternoon. They were full of congratulations and excitement, having seen the coverage of the Nobel ceremony in the international media. Victoria, darling, you looked absolutely radiant on television. My mother gushed. Your father and I were so proud watching from home. We recorded the whole thing, my father added. We've been showing it to everyone. The Hendersons, the Michaels, the entire board of directors. Everyone is so impressed. They were proud of me now, proud to show me off to their friends and colleagues, but they had missed the actual moment, the actual experience, the actual celebration. I'm so glad you enjoyed watching it, I said carefully. I have something special to show you at your holiday party, a gift that I think you'll find very meaningful. A gift? Oh, Victoria, you don't need to bring us anything. Your success is gift enough. Trust me, this is something you'll want to see. The Ashford holiday party was held every year on December 18th at our family estate in Saratoga Springs. It was the social event of the season, with over 200 guests, including business leaders, politicians, and local celebrities. My parents had been planning this party for months, and it was their opportunity to showcase their success and influence. I arrived at the party wearing a simple black dress and carrying a wrapped package that contained the crystal sculpture and a custom-bound book that held the complete photographic record of my week in Stockholm. The party was in full swing when I arrived. The house was decorated with thousands of white lights and fresh flowers. A string quartet played in the main parlor. Servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. It was elegant and expensive, and designed to impress. My parents were in their element, moving through the crowd, accepting congratulations on my Nobel Prize. Basking in the reflected glory of my achievement, Victoria. My father called out as he spotted me. Come here. I want you to meet Senator Williams, Senator. This is my daughter, the Nobel laureate. I smiled and shook hands and made polite conversation, but I was waiting for the right moment. That moment came when my father called for everyone's attention to make his traditional holiday toast. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, raising his glass. Thank you all for joining us for our annual holiday celebration. This year has been particularly special for the Ashford family, as our daughter Victoria has achieved something truly extraordinary. She has won the Nobel Prize in Medicine, and we couldn't be more proud. There was applause, and I felt every eye in the room turn to me. This was my moment. Thank you, Dad, I said, stepping forward. Since you mentioned my Nobel Prize, I have something special to share with everyone. I brought a gift for my parents that I think perfectly captures the significance of this achievement. I unwrapped the crystal sculpture and held it up for everyone to see. It caught the light from the chandelier and sparkled like captured starlight. This is a custom sculpture representing the molecular structure of the compound I discovered for early Alzheimer's detection. It was created by a master craftsman in Stockholm and inscribed with the date of my Nobel Prize ceremony. There were murmurs of appreciation from the crowd. The sculpture was genuinely beautiful and obviously expensive. But this isn't just any sculpture, I continued. It was created specifically to commemorate my week in Stockholm, where I was honored not just with a Nobel Prize, but with the presence of the people who supported me throughout my journey. I opened the bound book and held it up. This book contains a complete photographic record of that week, every moment, every celebration. Every person who chose to be there with me for one of the most important achievements of my life. I began flipping through the pages and the professional. Quality of the photography was immediately apparent. The images were stunning. Me in my gown at the ceremony, the dinner at the Nobel Museum, the private celebrations with my chosen family. Here I am receiving the Nobel Prize from the King of Sweden, I said, showing a page to the crowd. Here I am at the private dinner afterward, Surrounded by the people who supported my research, here I am with my former professor, Dr. Manning, who guided me through my Ph.D. program. Here I am with my research team, who worked alongside me for years to achieve this breakthrough. The room was completely silent now. Everyone was looking at the photographs, seeing the joy and celebration, and genuine love documented in every image. And here, I said, turning to the final page, is a photograph of the empty chairs I reserved for my parents at the Nobel ceremony. I saved them seats at the most important event of my life, and May chose not to come because of a business meeting. The silence in the room was deafening. I could see the shock on people's faces, the sudden understanding of what I was revealing. So this gift, I continued, is a complete record of everything you chose to miss, every moment of celebration, every expression of pride, every person who understood that supporting someone's dreams is more important than any business deal. I placed the sculpture and that book on the table in front of my parents. I want you to have this so you can see exactly what your priorities cost you. Not just my Nobel Prize ceremony, but my entire journey, every achievement, every milestone, every moment when I needed my family and found them too busy to show up. My mother's face had gone completely pale. My father was staring at the book with an expression I had never seen before, something between shock and recognition. "Victoria," my mother whispered, "we didn't realize. That's exactly the problem," I said. "You didn't realize you never realized for 33 years. You never realized that your daughter was achieving extraordinary things and needed your support, not your business calculations." I looked around the room at the faces of all these people who had been celebrating my parents' success. I want everyone here to understand something important. Success isn't just about what you achieve. It's about who you choose to share it with. My parents chose to share my achievement with all of you tonight, but they chose not to share the actual moment with me. I picked up my purse and walked toward the door, then turned back for one final statement. I won the Nobel Prize, and I celebrated it with people who love me unconditionally. That's the greatest achievement of all. I left the party and drove straight to my apartment in Cambridge. I turned off my phone and spent the night sitting by my window, looking out at the city lights and processing what I had just done. The next morning, I had dozens of missed calls and messages, some from my parents, some from relatives, some from family friends who had been at the party, but the first call I returned was to Sarah. "Victoria, I heard about what happened at the party. Patricia's friend, Jane, was there, and she called Patricia this morning. Are you okay?" "I'm more than okay," I said. "I'm free." And I was. For the first time in my life, I had spoken my truth without worrying about approval or consequences. I had shown my parents exactly what their choices had cost them, and I had done it with dignity and factual precision. My parents called that afternoon. My mother was crying. "Victoria, please come home. We need to talk about this. We need to fix this." "Mom, there's nothing to fix. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done." Done with what? Done trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Done accepting excuses for behavior that hurt me. Done pretending that business meetings are more important than family moments. My father got on the phone. "Victoria, you embarrassed us in front of our friends. You made us look like terrible parents." "Dad, I didn't make you look like terrible parents. I simply documented what actually happened. If you're embarrassed by your choices, perhaps you should examine why you made them. We were proud of you. We are proud of you. You're proud of what I achieved, but you weren't interested in supporting me while I was achieving it. There's a difference." The conversation went on for another hour with my parents cycling through anger, bargaining, and pleading, but I had reached a point of clarity that couldn't be shaken. "I love you both," I said finally, "but I don't need you to validate my achievements anymore. I have built a life surrounded by people who support me, believe in me, and show up for me. That's all I ever wanted from you, and it's what I found elsewhere. So, what does this mean?" My mother asked. "Are you cutting us out of your life?" "I'm not cutting you out. I'm just not making you central anymore. If you want to be part of my life, you need to show up for my life, not just for the public celebrations, but for the actual moments that matter." I hung up the phone and felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying over the following months. My relationship with my parents evolved in ways I hadn't expected. They began reaching out more often, asking about my work, my life, my feelings. They started showing genuine interest in my research rather than just its business implications. My mother began calling me every week, not to share family news or social gossip, but to ask how I was doing, what I was working on, what I was excited about. My father started sending me articles about neuroscience research with notes that said things like, "Thought you might find this interesting," rather than "thought you could use this for business." They were trying in their way to bridge the gap that had been created by decades of misplaced priorities. But the most significant change was in how I viewed myself and my achievements. I no longer needed their approval to feel proud of what I had accomplished. I had learned to celebrate my own successes, to value my own opinions, to trust my own judgment. I used the prize money from my Nobel Prize to establish the Ashford Foundation for Alzheimer's Research, which provides funding for young scientists pursuing innovative research in neurodegenerative diseases. I named it after my family, not as a gesture of reconciliation, but as a statement of who I had become despite their shortcomings. My parents attended the foundation's inaugural gala in May 2024. They sat in the audience and watched as I gave a speech about the importance of supporting young researchers, of believing in people's potential, of showing up for the people you love. After the speech, my mother approached me with tears in her eyes. "Victoria, I finally understand what we did wrong. We were so focused on our own success that we forgot to celebrate yours. We were so worried about our own image that we forgot to support your dreams. Mom, I don't need an apology. I need a relationship. If you want to be part of my life going forward, you need to show up for my life, not just for the public moments, but for the quiet ones too. We want to try," my father said. "We want to do better." "Then do better," I said. "Don't promise to do better, just do it." Today, as I write this story, I am 34 years old. I lead a research team of 12 brilliant scientists. I've been married for 6 months to Dr. James Chun, a fellow researcher who proposed to me in my lab surrounded by the work we both love. My parents came to my wedding. They sat in the front row, and they cried when I walked down the aisle. They gave a toast at the reception about how proud they were of the woman I had become. They didn't mention business once, but more importantly, they were there. They showed up. They participated in the actual moment instead of just claiming credit. For it afterward, I keep the crystal sculpture from Stockholm on my desk in my office. It reminds me every day that my worth isn't determined by other people's ability to recognize it. It reminds me that I built my own kingdom, surrounded myself with my own chosen family, and created my own definition of success. The Nobel Prize was my coronation, but not because of the award itself. It was my coronation because it was the moment I finally understood that I didn't need anyone else's permission to be proud of who I had become. My parents didn't come to my graduation, so I didn't invite them to my coronation, but in the end, I realized that the real coronation happened when I learned to celebrate myself, to value my own achievements, and to surround myself with people who love me for exactly who I am. The greatest revenge isn't hurting the people who hurt you. The greatest revenge is building a life so beautiful, so fulfilling, so authentically yours that their absence becomes irrelevant. I'm Dr. Zara Ashford, Nobel laureate, researcher, wife, and founder of a foundation that will support young scientists for generations to come. I'm surrounded by people who believe in me, support me, and show up for me, and I am finally, completely, unapologetically proud of who I have become. Have you ever had to choose between peace and family? Sometimes the most powerful revenge is walking away. Sometimes it's building something so magnificent that their absence becomes irrelevant. I learned that you can't force people to value you, but you can stop waiting for their validation. You can build your own support system, create your own celebrations, and define your own success. My parents missed my graduation because they had other priorities. They missed my Nobel Prize ceremony because they had other commitments, but they didn't miss the lesson I taught them about what their choices cost them. If my story resonated with you, hit like, subscribe to Silent Revenge. and share your truth in the comments. Have you ever had to teach someone about the value of showing up? Have you ever had to choose between your peace and your family's expectations? Because sometimes justice whispers and still echoes forever. The most powerful revenge isn't destroying someone else's life. It's building your own life so beautifully, so authentically, so successfully that their opinion becomes irrelevant. I am Dr. Mia Ashford, and I crowned myself. The weeks following my parents' holiday party revelation brought unexpected consequences that I hadn't anticipated. Word of what happened spread through Saratoga Springs' elite social circles like wildfire, and within days, the story had reached business journalists and pharmaceutical industry publications. The first article appeared in Biopharma Weekly 3 days after the party. The headline read, "Nobel laureate confronts family over missed ceremony at holiday gathering." The article was sympathetic to my position, noting how my parents' absence from such a significant achievement highlighted broader issues about work life, balance, and executive families. But the real media attention came when Sarah, now a successful journalist herself, wrote a first-hand account for The Atlantic titled "The Loneliness of Excellence: When Family Success Comes at the Cost of Family." Support. She had been there for every missed birthday, every broken promise, every moment when I needed family support and received business advice instead. The article went viral within hours. Social media exploded with similar stories from high achievers whose families had prioritized business over personal milestones. The hashtag show up for success began trending, with thousands of people sharing their own stories of family members who missed graduations, weddings, and achievements for work obligations. My parents were mortified. Harrison Ashford, who had built his reputation on being a family man who successfully balanced business and personal life, was now the subject of think pieces about parental priorities. The board of directors at Ashford Biogenics called an emergency meeting to discuss the reputational impact of the situation. My mother called me, sobbing, "Zara, please. The media is making us look like monsters. People are saying terrible things about us online. Some of your father's business partners are questioning his judgment. Can't you make a statement? Can't you tell them we're not bad people?" "Mom, I never said you were bad people. I said you made choices that hurt me. The media isn't making you look like anything. They're reporting what actually happened, but the way they're portraying. It makes us seem so cold, so uncaring. How would you have portrayed it? How would you have explained missing your daughter's Nobel Prize ceremony?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm filled with 33 years of misplaced priorities. "We thought you would understand," she whispered finally. "We thought you knew how much we loved you, even if we couldn't always be there. Mom, love isn't something you know. Love is something you show. And you showed me that business meetings were more important than my biggest achievements." The conversation ended with my mother promising to make this right somehow. But I wasn't sure what that could possibly mean. 2 weeks after the media storm began, I received a call that would change everything again. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the director of the World Health Organization's Global Health Initiative, was on the line. "Mia, I hope you don't mind me calling directly. I've been following your work on Alzheimer's research for years, and I've also been following the recent media coverage of your family situation. Dr. Vasquez, it's an honor to hear from you, though I have to say, I didn't expect my family drama to reach the WHO. Actually, that's exactly why I'm calling. The media coverage has sparked a global conversation about supporting young scientists and researchers. We've received thousands of messages from people who feel that brilliant minds are being overlooked because they don't have family support or institutional backing." She paused, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. "We want to offer you the position of Director of Global Research Innovation. It's a new position we're creating specifically to identify and support young researchers worldwide who are working on breakthrough treatments for neurodegenerative diseases." I nearly dropped the phone. The WHO position would give me a platform to support thousands of researchers globally. It would be the most significant career opportunity of my life. "Dr. Vasquez, I'm honored, but I have to ask, is this offer related to the recent publicity?" "Dr. Ashford, we've been considering you for leadership roles for over a year. Your research speaks for itself, but the recent events have shown us something else about you, your commitment to supporting others, your integrity under pressure, and your ability to speak truth even when it's difficult. Those are exactly the qualities we need in this position. The offer was extraordinary, a 5-year contract, a budget of $500 million for global research grants, and the opportunity to establish research centers in developing countries where brilliant minds were being overlooked. There's one more thing, Dr. Vasquez added. We'd like you to speak at the World Health Assembly in Geneva next month. We want you to address the global community about the importance of supporting young researchers, regardless of their family, circumstances, or institutional connections. After I hung up, I sat in my office staring at the crystal sculpture from Stockholm. 6 months ago, I had been focused on my own research and my own achievements. Now I was being offered the opportunity to change the entire landscape of global medical research. But first, I had to make a decision about my parents. The World Health Assembly in Geneva was scheduled for February 15th, 2024. My parents had been trying to reach me for weeks, wanting to discuss the WHO position they had read about in the financial press. 3 days before I was scheduled to leave for Geneva, they showed up at my apartment in Cambridge unannounced. I opened the door to find them both standing in the hallway, looking older and more uncertain than I had ever seen them. "Mia, we need to talk," my father said. "May we come in?" I let them in, and we sat in my living room with the awkwardness of strangers. My mother looked around at my life, the medical journals, the research awards, the photographs of me with colleagues and friends, as if seeing it all for the first time. "We've been thinking about what you said," my mother began, "about showing up, about being present for the moments that matter." "And?" I asked. "We want to come to Geneva," my father said. "We want to be there when you speak at the World Health Assembly." I stared at them. "You want to come to Geneva?" "We know we miss Stockholm," my mother said. "We know we miss your graduation. We know we miss so many important moments in your life, but we don't want to miss this one." "Why?" I asked. "Why this one?" My father was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer, more vulnerable than I had ever heard it, because we finally understand what we lost. Not just the ceremonies or the speeches, but the relationship with our daughter. We lost the right to be proud of you because we were never there to support you. We've been going to therapy," my mother added. "A family counselor. She's been helping us understand how our priorities affected." "You, therapy?" I was genuinely surprised. The media coverage was a wake-up call, my father continued. Reading about our choices in the newspaper, seeing how other people viewed our behavior, it forced us to look at ourselves honestly for the first time. My mother reached into her purse and pulled out a letter. "We wrote this for you. It's not an excuse or a justification. It's an acknowledgement of what we did wrong, and a promise about what we want to do differently." I took the letter but didn't open it immediately. "If you come to Geneva," I said carefully, "it can't be about your image or your business relationships. It can't be about being seen or making connections. It has to be about supporting me, personally. And genuinely, we understand," my father said. "We want to be there because we're proud of you, not because we want to be associated with your success. And if I don't want you there, if I've moved past needing your support," my mother's eyes filled with tears, "then we'll respect that. But we're hoping you'll give us one more chance to show up for you." I looked at these two people who had shaped my life in ways both painful and profound. They had taught me independence by refusing to be dependable. They had taught me self-reliance by being unreliable. They had taught me to value genuine relationships by failing to provide one themselves. "I'll think about it," I said finally. That night I read their letter. It was 3 pages of handwritten acknowledgement. No excuses, no justifications. Just recognition of specific moments when they had chosen business over family, success over support, image over relationship. The final paragraph read, "We know. We can't undo the past, but we want to be part of your future, not as people who take credit for your achievements, but as people who finally learn to celebrate them." I called them the next morning. You can come to Geneva, I said, but you're coming as my guests, not as my parents trying to make up for lost time. You're coming to witness my speech, not to network or make business connections. We understand, my mother said. Thank you for giving us this chance. Don't thank me yet, I said. Thank me after you've actually shown up. The World Health Assembly in Geneva was held in the stunning Pollard Nations with over 3,000 delegates from 194 countries. I had been scheduled to speak on the opening day about global research innovation and the importance of supporting young scientists. My parents arrived the day before my speech, and I met them at their hotel. They looked nervous, uncertain, like they didn't quite know how to behave in a situation where they weren't the center of attention. Are you ready for tomorrow? My mother asked. I've been ready for this my entire career, I said. The question is whether you're ready to be here for the right reasons. The morning of my speech, I stood in the wings of the assembly hall, looking out at the sea of faces. Representing the global health community, my parents were in the audience, sitting quietly in the section reserved for speakers' families. When I was introduced, I walked to the podium and looked out at the audience. For a moment, I saw my parents, faces in the crowd, not proud or calculating, but simply present, distinguished delegates. I began. I stand before you today not just as a researcher or a Nobel laureate, but as someone who understands the profound impact that support or the lack of it can have on scientific innovation. I spoke for 30 minutes about the brilliant minds being overlooked in developing countries, about the young researchers who abandon their work because they lack institutional support, about the discoveries that never happen because potential scientists don't have advocates. Throughout my career, I said, I have learned that excellence is not created in isolation. It is nurtured by communities, supported by mentors, and celebrated by people who understand its value. Today, I'm announcing the launch of the Global Research Innovation Network, which will provide not just funding, but comprehensive support systems for young researchers worldwide. As I spoke, I could see my parents listening intently, beginning to understand perhaps for the first time what my work actually meant, not just for our family or for business, but for the world. We will establish research centers in 20 countries over the next 5 years. I continued. We will provide mentorship, programs, family support services, and celebration protocols that ensure no brilliant mind is overlooked because they lack traditional support systems. The applause was thunderous as I left the podium. I saw my parents in the audience, not networking or making connections, but simply clapping and crying. After the speech, they approached me in the reception area. Mia, my mother said, I finally understand what you've been working toward all these years. This isn't just about your research. It's about changing how the world supports brilliance. I'm proud of you, my father said. And for the first time in my life, it didn't sound like a business assessment. It sounded like a father. Thank you for being here. I said, for actually being here, not just physically present. Thank you for letting us be here, my mother replied, for giving us a chance to finally show up for you. That evening, we had dinner together, just the three of us. Number of business colleagues or social obligations, they asked about my research, about my plans for the new WHO position, about my marriage to James. They listened without calculating business implications or social advantages for the first time in my life. I felt like I was having dinner with my parents, rather than with my parents' public personas. 6 months later, I stood in the ballroom of the Palais des Nations in Geneva, surrounded by 500 of the world's most distinguished scientists, health ministers, and research advocates. The Global Research Innovation Network had officially launched, and we were celebrating the first cohort of young researchers who would receive comprehensive support for their groundbreaking work. My parents were there, sitting at a table not with business contacts or social connections, but with Sarah and her parents, Dr. Manning and her husband, and my research team. They had finally learned to be part of my actual community rather than trying to create business opportunities from my achievements. James stood beside me as I addressed the gathering. 1 year ago, I stood in the same building and spoke about the importance of supporting young scientists. Tonight, I want to talk about the importance of supporting each other, not just professionally, But personally, I looked out at the audience, seeing faces from every continent, representing every field of medical research, the global research. Innovation Network exists because we believe that brilliance should be nurtured regardless of family circumstances, economic background, or institutional connections. But more than that, it exists because we believe that everyone deserves to have their achievements celebrated by people who genuinely care about their success. I paused, looking at my parents. This past year, I've learned that it's never too late for people to change, to grow, to learn how to show up for each other. My parents are here tonight not because they want to be associated with my success, but because they've learned to be genuinely proud of who I am. The applause was warm and sustained. After the formal presentations, my father approached me. Mia, I want you to know that being here tonight, seeing what you've built, understanding what you're trying to accomplish, this is the proudest moment of my life. Why? I asked, what's different about tonight? Because tonight, I'm not proud of what you've achieved. I'm proud of who you are. And I'm proud that you're my daughter, not because of what it means for me, but because of what it means for the world. My mother joined us, and for the first time in my life, the three of us stood together in a moment of genuine connection. You know, my mother said, I used to think that your success reflected well on us as parents, but I realize now that we had nothing to do with your success. You achieved everything. You've achieved despite us, not because of us. That's not entirely true. I said, you taught me independence. You taught me self-reliance. You taught me not to need other people's approval to feel proud of my achievements. We taught you those things by accident, my father said, by failing to give you what you actually needed. Maybe, I said, but I learned them anyway. And now I'm using those lessons to help other people who might not have the support they need. Later that evening, as the reception was winding down, I found myself alone on the balcony overlooking Lake Geneva. The city lights reflected on the water, and I could hear the quiet conversations of colleagues and friends inside. James joined me, wrapping his arms around me from behind. How do you feel? He asked. Complete, I said. For the first time in my life, I feel complete. Because of the network launch, because of everything, the work, the relationships, the family reconciliation, but mostly because I finally understand that I don't need anyone else's validation to feel proud of who I am. Even your parents? I thought about that for a moment. I'm glad they're here. I'm glad they've learned to show up for me, but I don't need their approval anymore. I built my own life, my own family, my own definition of success. Their presence is a gift, not a necessity. That's the real victory, isn't it? James said. Not changing them, but becoming someone who doesn't need to change them. I leaned back against him, looking out at the lake where the reflections of the city lights created a second world beneath the surface. My parents didn't come to my graduation, I said. So I didn't invite them to my coronation, but it turns out the real coronation was learning that I didn't need their permission to be proud of myself. And now they're invited to everything, not because I need them there, but because they've earned the right to be there. Inside, I could hear Sarah laughing with my research team, my parents talking quietly with Dr. Manning, and the sounds of a celebration. Filled with people who had chosen to support each other, this was my true coronation. Not a moment of revenge or vindication, but a moment of completeness. I built a life surrounded by people who loved me, work that mattered to the world. And finally, a relationship with my parents based on mutual respect rather than desperate need for approval. I was Dr. Mia Ashford, Nobel laureate, who director of global research innovation, and founder of a network that would support brilliant minds for generations to come. But more than that, I was someone who had learned to celebrate herself, to value her own achievements, and to build her own definition of success. The greatest revenge wasn't hurting the people who had hurt me. The greatest revenge was building a life so beautiful, so fulfilling, so authentically mine that their approval became irrelevant and their presence became a gift rather than a necessity.